Hi, everybody. This is the Gospel of John study. My name is Bill. I'm from BCUMC. Today is Friday, July 28th. We are in week 10, day 4. We are going to be reading from John chapter 19, and then we will hear from the author, Ben Witherington III, his comments in the text, and then we'll look at some reflection questions. So let's get started. Beginning at verse 16, finally Pilate handed him over to them to be crucified. So the soldiers took charge of Jesus. Carrying his own cross, he went out to the place of the skull, which in Aramaic is called Golgotha. There they crucified him, and with him 2 others, one on each side and Jesus in the middle. Pilate had a notice prepared and fastened to the cross. It read, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. Many of the Jews read the sign, for the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and the sign was written in Aramaic, Latin, and Greek. The chief priests of the Jews protested to Pilate, "Do not write the King of the Jews, but that this man claimed to be the King of the Jews." Pilate answered, "What I have written, I have written." When the soldiers crucified Jesus, they took his clothes, dividing them into 4 shares, one for each of them, with the undergarment remaining. The garment was seamless, woven in one piece from top to bottom. "Let's not tear it," they said to one another. "Let's decide by lot who will get it." This happened that the scripture might be fulfilled that said, "They divided my clothes among them and cast lots for my garment." So this is what the soldiers did. All right, I'm going to read now from the text on page 143 and 144. The titulus, or the place card that would be hung on the cross, indicated the crime for which the person was being executed. It is important to note that Jesus is crucified for being King of the Jews, not Messiah or prophet, but rather the universal political term king. The title is written in 3 languages, Latin, Greek, and either Hebrew or Aramaic, probably the latter. Aramaic was sometimes called the Hebrew tongue, especially in Judea, because this is the language that the Jews from Judea had come home from Babylon speaking. Aramaic is the sister tongue to Hebrew. There was a further squabble over the titulus. The priests wanted a modification so it would merely say that Jesus claimed to be the King of the Jews, but Pilate does not cave in. He says it's too late for that. A legal verdict has been rendered. What I have written, I have written. And so the irony of the whole story continues. The King of the Jews is both wrongly and rightly executed for being the King of the Jews. Wrongly because his kingdom is not of this world. Rightly because he really was the King of the Jews, and that had a political implementation. As we have said in this gospel, the spotlight is on Jesus. He carries his own cross. There is no verbal exchange with the other people being executed. They are barely mentioned in this passing. And the soldiers gabble over Jesus' inner garment, a more expensive, seamless robe. There is a historical evidence that the executioners had a right to claim property of those whom they executed. The evangelist, however, wants to stress here is another detail that fulfills Scripture. In this case, Psalm 22, verse 18. It is interesting that while we do not have the cry of dereliction by Jesus from the cross in John, i.e., my God, why have you forsaken me?" found in Matthew and Mark, it is also a quote from that same Psalm 22. It is clear that the whole psalm was read messianically as a clue to how to make sense of Jesus' death on the cross. I would encourage you to go back and read the psalm at this point. One final note: the curtain in Herod's temple was seamless, and in the synoptics we hear about it being ripped from top to bottom at the point of Jesus' death, which is seen as a divine act and omen. Here Jesus, who has said that his body is a real temple, has the covering of his holy self taken, and it too is seamless, and the soldiers say, "Let's not tear it." This is an interesting point and counterpoint when you compare the synoptics and the Johannine stories about the crucifixion. All right, let's look at the questions. Why do you think the evangelist focuses on what he does in telling of the demise of Jesus, making various unique points not found elsewhere? Question 2. Crucifixion was normally in the nude as part of the total shaming of the victim. As this account suggests that the soldiers gambled for Jesus' undergarment, why do you think artists have always depicted Jesus as at least having a loincloth on when he hung on the cross? What blame should be placed on these soldiers, if any, for following orders and doing their job? All right, until tomorrow, have a great rest of your day.